Welcome back to the X Podcast. I am at the long table with Timothy Moore. How are you?
I was waiting for a drum roll the way you were talking. Sorry, I'm good.
No.
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
You
Last night,
you look good in blue.
Do I? My eyes sparkle?
Mm-hmm. They sparkle.
Listen, I read a Men's Health magazine when I was in middle school. It said, when in doubt, match your eyes.
Yeah, blue looks best on me as well.
The baby blues.
There is something about when you wear clothing that matches the color of your eyes that it just looks best to get with you.
You know who they are talking about right now? His piercing blue eyes.
Oh,
have you heard about this?
Yeah, J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance.
Yeah, I saw that. I've read some articles about that.
Did you see that whether it was accidental or intentional that he posted a picture that had been AI shifted? Before commenting, they're like, yeah, I didn't know the Hemsworth brother was running for VP.
His eyes looked fake. I mean, they aren't, but
Yeah.
in his eyelashes, that's what they said suburban women all over America have fallen in love with J.D. Vance after the debate. But we're not here to talk about the debate, but still, I mean.
Which way? Oh, we have no more debates. We just have an election coming up.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay.
We'll talk about that.
Yes, we will talk about that. And last night was amazing. If you're a part of our faith community and you're a male, then hopefully you were here. We had our first, I don't know, since we've been in this new building in our church in 4 years, men's night. And the resounding two things I've heard from everybody, whether on staff or that just, would say, hey, I belong here, I attend here, is I was surprised. Nobody could believe how many people showed up.
Yeah.
It was just shocking almost in a good way. And then number two, just how awesome it was.
Yeah.
And I was texting with PZ. I said, it felt like, it sounds weird, but you could feel that last night, because we let people out from the experience around 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
You gave an incredible talk, very practical. Let people out around 8 o'clock. I didn't leave the building till 10:30 or 11.
Yeah, I left a little after 10.
And just people lingered at fires outside. Will Price, shout out, smoked the best barbecue.
That was some of the best I've ever had.
It was amazing.
I'm not going to lie. I told
Yes.
him, I literally said, I don't even like pulled pork very much.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is the best I've had.
Yeah.
It
was so good.
Excellent.
It was so good. And it just, I got 2 plates full of it. I was trying to, go low on the carb.
I didn't do any buns either. And I
did twice. It was so good. But honestly, I felt, as weird as it sounds, it's almost like I could tangibly feel that last night was medicine.
Yeah.
For them in our house.
It felt amazing.
To just like the conversations and the way you could just feel that craving of community and just having it was just rich. It was just rich, and it was so good. But, part of it is coming, it wasn't planned this way, but part of it is we've recently wrapped up a series on the art of connection, the power of relationships, the power of our interactions, the power of connection. And I think it's been so good. The first week, you really started the core with how shame affects our relationships and our health, and then went into kind of like deep EQ into our friendships. How do you actually make friends, keep friends, be a good friend, have healthy relationships, interactions, and then took a little bit broader into community. And then one of my favorite ones was the last week when we talked about what it looked like to actually connect with people who are different than us, think different, vote different, believe different with the world. So impactful, so helpful. But you probably feel like, I feel like from the conversations we've had, and even last year, what we did with our staff retreat with EQ, I'm sure you probably feel like 90% is still on the cutting floor.
Oh, yeah.
Of all the stuff when it comes to EQ, and especially EQ in the church. And, how are you feeling coming off the series?
The feedback has been wonderful. And again, this was one of those things that I had planned a relationship series, but wasn't this angle. And so you even kind of encouraged me. It was probably about 2 months ago, from some conversations with people in the church. You're like, man, there's just some basic EQ stuff missing when I talk to people sometimes.
Yeah, and even just, I think I told you.
And that's what kind of shifted the whole series, which I thought that was great inspiration. You know what? And the more I thought about it, I was like, maybe it would be, honestly, of any relationship, because usually in a church, when you hear relationship series, it's always either marriage or dating. And to kind of go away from that and just talk about other aspects of relationships and how to connect. And that, honestly, is probably my favorite relationship series ever of doing it. It really
I think
was
everybody else did the same thing.
It was like one of my favorite
Yeah.
ever to do. I felt like it's one of those ones where everybody in the room goes, "Oh yeah, I need this," or "This matters."
Yeah.
And I feel like even from men's night, that it was a combination of almost week 2 and week 3.
Mm-hmm.
That it was the importance of community, and I think everybody could sense that and feel it. But the more important piece that everybody, I could tell when I had conversations with men that were longing for, is they were like, we want more of the friendship piece.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, I was talking to one guy, Ricky. Shout out to Ricky Guzman, and he's been waiting for us to do something on men's
La
stuff.
Familia.
Yeah, La Familia.
Vin Diesel.
Yeah, he is kind of our local Vin Diesel. And the aspect of just connecting, being around a fire, having some food, guys talking, that's like something he craves. And we were talking about this and referring to one of the books that we referenced from the night, was how hard it is, I think, as you get older to have friends or to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when you're young and maybe you're in a college age scene and, it's kind of everybody's single and it's easy to have like a lot of friends coming out of high school. But I was talking with him, I was like, but once you maybe even get married or have kids, not even intentionally, but your world changes with the people that you were with all of a sudden. And now you find yourself very focused on family and other things, which is important. And you need all of that it's easy to not have connections. And so I was talking to a bunch of different guys, and I told him, I said, if you ask me, I said, I think that there is a few critical components that are needed for relationships, especially if you're married. So this would be just for married. I said, if you're married, I think husband and wife have to make time to date and to do things together.
Yeah.
Married, I should say, with kids.
Yep.
Because a lot of the guys I was talking to, they have kids, and so they would all go like, yes. I said, they need that. I said, guys need guy friends. Girls need girlfriends. And I said, the bonus and one of the best, if you can ever get even beyond those 3 things, is when couples can have couples friends. That is some of the life-giving, and it's really true. And some of the stats we talked about through the series, I do think the quality of joy and fulfillment and everything you feel in life has so little to do with your job, your career, how much money you make, how successful your kids are, all these things. I really do think it's the people you surround yourself and you can do life with. And so last night when we got together, it was just kind of like one of those things, like we just want to encourage.
Yeah.
We tried to encourage guys, go create this model on your own.
Yeah.
If you like to smoke cigars, and I it's funny because we were talking about the book. One of the small groups, one of the circles in our church does that, had went through that book and then started doing it. And so they would get together on Friday evenings, and he said sometimes it'd be 2 or 3, sometimes 10 guys would show up, and they get around a fire, and they all like cigars or whatever, or something else, and they would ask one of the questions.
I love it.
And so it's kind of cool. And
Yeah.
so what I saw was very affirming of even like we were doing, they're like, yes, we love this.
So cool.
So it was beautiful.
I had so many incredible conversations last night, and even just today, I went to Micah's to get my hair cut because we're, getting ready to fly out. And he's talked about this the last 2 weeks. He is obsessed with this EQ thing now. He's like, bro, I never heard of this EQ thing. He goes, and now it's all I think about. I think about it every time. He's like, I'm always telling Hope, this is his fiance. He's like, oh, that was a low EQ moment, wasn't it? That was a high EQ moment. He goes, last week, my boy was in here. He goes, and I took him home. I said, listen, I'm going to talk to you about some EQ moments that I didn't like. And so it's funny. His son asked him, what does EQ stand for? He goes, man, I forget. He said, but he said, and I said, it's emotional quotient. He said, yeah, I told him, look, I don't remember what it is, but I'm going to tell you what it is. And
I love it.
And he's like, and when we get home, Hope's going to dive deeper into EQ so you can understand. And I
love that.
Yeah. It's just, it really is a game changer in your relationships and your job and in your life when you can be aware and then increase it.
Well, and they've also, studies are continuing to show that it's not your emotional or it's not your intellectual intelligence that actually determines your success in life. As much as your emotional intelligence, which is a big change. That's one of the things I talked about. Is a big change from the way it was in the 90s.
Yes.
Everything is IQ and, and then what we've discovered is actually, the people that seem to be further along are the ones that know how to manage relationships. They know how to manage conflict well.
Yep.
They know how to recognize and care for people as leaders. They know how to, all these things that go with emotional intelligence. And so it is a broad, it's
because life is all about relationships.
It really is.
And EQ is going to determine the health of them.
Yeah. And as we all know, even in the business world, it's not what you know, but
who you know.
Who you know. And so those kind of connections and relationships make a big deal.
How do you see this play out in the church?
Well, here's the thing.
It's a big question.
Yeah, no, because I didn't have time. Because I mentioned this. I said, man, maybe we could do a podcast on this because I didn't really get a chance in the message on community with the direction that it went. I don't like to force, when I get into either studying a passage or something, wherever that passage kind of leads me is where I go. Even if I have ideas of man, I want to say this and I want to talk about this because this is really valuable. If that's not where I go, where the message, then I cut it. I just don't. And there were emotional intelligence, low EQ moments that I think both of us, probably everybody who's ever been in church has experienced. Now, with that being said, I don't think people in churches necessarily have lower EQ than anybody else. I just think in general, it's kind of like a lost art. It's kind of maybe it's never really been again, grown men and people are going to go, I never heard of this. So this is not, I think this is what I'd say probably in the last 5 years has kind of become a really hot thing.
Yeah.
But I would say up until probably 2010s or up until that, it's nobody ever talked about this. And so for the last decade or so, maybe a little more than that, but it's kind of jumping onto the kind of cultural scene where people are starting to understand it.
Or it's been even rebranded because, I mean, I will say in the 90s and 2000s, you had the wild popularity of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You have Dale Carnegie's classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So the idea has been there, I think, all along of it really is all about relationships and people skills matter. Maybe now people skills is starting to be thin sliced into the way you do people skills as you grow your EQ.
And that's probably what it is. I think people looked at them and went, oh, they're really good at that. Maybe that's natural. Maybe there's thin slicing. Maybe that's this. Versus now it's becoming, there's people building structures around it going, you can, one of the things we've discovered is unlike your IQ, which most scientists think doesn't really change much from the time you're little, because IQ, your intellectual intelligence, which by the way, if you always are curious about the Q stuff, because I studied all this stuff, even though I didn't use any of it, IQ is emotional quotient, which is basically it's the measurement of your intellectual intelligence. You won't see II, you'll see IQ. It is the same thing basically, but the Q portion is because it created tests so that when people took the test, it gave them a score. And so that's where the quotient part, that's where you're how much of that you have.
Right.
So just for reference, if it is new to you, same thing. Some people would say they're a little bit different, and emotional intelligence and EQ are mostly interchangeable in the world of psychology and social sciences. They're mostly interchangeable. Some people would say emotional intelligence is the awareness of it, and the EQ aspect is the expression of it. But I think that's probably a little bit of a stretch. I think it's just EQ was how do we measure someone's emotional intelligence, and that's kind of the measure of it. And so there were things in regards to that with the church one. I don't think that people in the church have any less than general broad public, but I do think it's felt more because it is a community that you are very closely connected to. So anytime you throw yourself into, again, this is a unique community because, if you're in the gym community, let's say you're a CrossFit nerd. If you're a CrossFit community, right? Everybody kind of is there's a I guess maybe they're all similar. This real common bond, which is CrossFit, and then it's kind of a culture, and a lot of people kind of maybe are very similar. Same thing in gym communities, same thing in a lot of them. The church, I think, is maybe, of all of them, even though we have something in common maybe, which is spirituality, a desire to know God, all those things, I think it tends to be one of the broadest reaching communities. Every socioeconomic background, race, color, ethnicity, church experience could have all different flavors of church experience. And so and maybe those things just don't matter that much when you're at CrossFit because all you talk about is CrossFit and maybe, I don't know. You've been CrossFit. What else do you talk about? You talk about CrossFit.
So about CrossFit.
What you eat.
And the
what shoes you're going to wear.
What CrossFit, CrossFit approved ice creams.
There you go.
And beers everybody likes.
And what CrossFit shoes are you going to buy? Whatever. And so you get whereas in the church world, I think you're kind of mashing people together, and they actually develop more than just at gym relationships, but they kind of like intertwine their lives a bit more. So I think there's more potential for EQ explosions. I don't know that's the way to say it. Yeah. There's more opportunity.
Yeah. Well, then you add that on top of churches are full of humans that are all broken. But in a lot of ways, church communities, and it's a good thing because Jesus came for the broken.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I heard somebody describe it one time as church is a collective place where everybody's seeking therapy through Jesus. So there's
there you go.
You have a lot of variation of health and brokenness on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think a beautiful church, and I think, I'm biased, I think our church is really beautiful in this aspect, has a lot of diversity in terms of where people are at on their faith journey, their background, their track of freedom and brokenness, and, socioeconomic backgrounds. There's, I think a really thriving church has a lot of diversity, which also, though, creates a lot of friction and a lot of differences.
Yeah. And so I think emotional intelligence is something that, again, this is almost not a subject. Pete Scazzaro was probably one of the first, I feel like, that kind of championed this in church world. I think some of his first stuff was almost 20 years ago. So you're talking about being ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Big time. He was. But I think one of the things we kind of recognized as leadership of this church 5-6 years ago, maybe more, was I think that there's a piece of even emotional intelligence that is missing from spiritual development and growth. And I think because so much of our development is done in community and is done through relationships, the whole idea of being a part of a church is you're not doing it on your own. I mean, if you want to grow on your own, do your own stuff. I'm going to read my Bible on my own. I'm going to pray on my own. I'm going to do that. I mean, anybody can do that, right? But the whole aspect of being in a church community is you're another piece of your spiritual maturity and growth, but it's happening in the context of relationships, which I think has been an ignored thing in church, my experience, church history for a long time. Everything is spiritual growth and development comes from spiritual practices. And some of that's true, but then I keep seeing setbacks, and I keep seeing people that are well, I'm doing this spiritual practices, but then there's I got to filter my language. There's still jerks. I wasn't going to actually say, but they're why is this person a jerk, to people and think it's fine, but then over here, and so.
Well, the Pete Scazzaro's thing is his whole motto is you can't be spiritually mature and emotionally immature at the same time.
Yeah, and I think there's so much truth to that we are, I want to say, in the church world, waking up to in trying to help people grow spiritually. Is a recognition that people need some help in regards to EQ as well. And so that's kind of that, and beyond this is what we're kind of trying to lean into a little bit.
So not to highlight the negative, but what are some areas of opportunity for growth that are pretty consistent in faith communities?
Let me say one thing, and I'll be curious. You probably will need to say something so this doesn't sound bad and only coming from me. The kind of people, and I've been in church my entire life, okay? I'm a professional. In other words, I get paid to do ministry. I've been in church my entire life. The kind of people that scare me the most, the kind of people that turn me off the most, are the ones that are overly churchy or hyper spiritualized.
So explain.
And I want to, yes, because it almost sounds bad. It's kind of it's they're really religious, and that has different connotations even. So this is what I want to say. When I say overly churchy, I mean they have what has become norm for them in language and behavior is not normal outside of whatever small bubble they were in. Okay, let me start that way. You know, you grow up in a specific context, going to a specific church, you know, with different rules, different kind of lingo, different phraseology, different things that became norm. And all of us, I don't care whether it's church environment or not, the environment we are raised in creates the base, creates the normalization that we do of language and behavior and all of these things. We're very much a byproduct of our environment. And I think one of the things I will see is when I meet people who show up, and I can tell instantly within 5 seconds of our conversation that this person has a specific church background. And I'm not picking on any one. I'm just like, you can just tell. And the language that they use, what they don't realize is, to a lot of people, maybe even outside the church world, and I'm going to say a lot of people in the church world, the language they use is actually alienating them from real relationship. In other words, I don't really want to be around that person.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to know that person. I would not want to be in a circle or small group with that person. I would not, you know what I mean? And so that's what I mean by people who are overly churchy. What I mean by is that their language comes from environments where it's like the first thing you say when you see somebody is like, man, I am highly blessed and favored of the Lord, or they just like the versus, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
there's a normal human, I want to say at least Western interaction.
Yeah.
That, you wouldn't walk to somebody, in an office building and just go up to them and start talking to them in these kind of phrases that are like, you turn your head and like, you're okay, that's odd. I don't, know what to make of you.
Yeah.
And so I think there's overly churchy, and then I think there's hyper spiritualized, which are the people that may barely know you.
But let's stop on the churchy.
Okay, go ahead.
You came out there for a second.
Okay.
Because I think like one of the things I've tried to grow my compassion on over the last year or so is to understand that like wherever you're at, ourselves included, cultures are built by common set of language and behaviors, and everybody has them, us included. And so I've tried to like remind myself that, because like you, I find myself immediately looking for the exit door when I begin to hear it.
Yeah.
And I try to remind myself like this is not a reflection on who they are. And
well, no, actually it is a reflection, but
it
maybe they don't realize it's this kind of reflection.
Yeah. Well, here's a better way to say it. It's not necessarily a reflection on their character.
Yes. That I agree with.
But I do think it's an important conversation, not for the sake of being picky.
No.
But because
I want to help
people. Yes. Like if we're going to reach people, not only for the sake of our own personal health of having meaningful relationships and connections, but for the sake of connecting with people that are different than us. Because the truth is it can hinder you from both. Because maybe another way to phrase it is you can tell when you meet somebody that when you meet them, you feel like you're talking to a persona more than a person. And the persona feels like church, not human.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, wait, you're saying a lot of things and they all feel real polished and Christian-y, but what?
Yeah.
I won't be specific, but there's places I flew over the summer and just did some different camps and stuff.
Tell us the church name, though.
There's a place I went and like, and this is maybe where, again, like everybody's different. And I felt like God's hand was on some things that summer in the arrangements of everything, and I felt that internally. But every conversation I had when I arrived at a certain place, it was like, oh, hello, Pastor Russ. Oh, man, I can't wait to hear what the Lord has been speaking to you for tonight. I'm thinking, man, I've prepared. I hope it's God.
Hope it's something for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I do. And it was like, and it looks like somebody's hand has been obviously over everything that's been. And I mean, all these things are great. And it sounds like I'm being picky.
I know.
But within 30 seconds, I'm like, oh, I don't feel comfortable.
Well, I don't feel like I'm going to measure up to your expectations.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm going to measure up to your expectations. And so the reason it matters, and that may not be the best example because it just sounds picky, but the reason this matters is language can end up being a facade for reality. And in your own personal relationships, if you're never able to break past vernacular and break away verbiage and speak truthfully, then since connection is only built through vulnerability and honesty, it can actually hinder real human relationships, number one. And then number two, it can be a reflection that you've been around a certain bubble so long that you have lost the art of actually talking to normal people in the world.
Yeah.
And you'll never be able to connect with people on a normal level if you if you're not actually really intentional to only speak human and not speak church.
Yeah. I want to just to follow up to what you said, the first one, because I do think that for some people it is normal because that's what they've been around. And I think if you're in that environment, that may be one of the ways you connect with people in that environment.
True.
So I wanted to say, it's not that you can't connect with people when you're like, I'm just saying when you step outside of that environment, that's when you're going to sound like a foreigner talking in a completely different language.
But I want to double down on the first one because I understand what you're saying. But my only challenge to your nuance would be, I've talked to people that are so used to coding everything they say in that language that it feels to me like they are not able to actually say what they're really feeling.
I can't argue for or against that.
That's
it might be
everybody.
true. Because it might be true. I mean, I just know that it's something that's very normalized.
Yes.
And you don't. So you step out of it and think it's normal to act or talk a certain way.
Yes.
I mean, I'll give you an example. Man, I've got a few examples. I'm always really careful on some of these. Let's talk about some examples of maybe some basic church EQ. And I'm curious if you've got a few. Here's one that I've run into a few times. And they're usually first-time guests. So this will be helpful for you. Anybody stepping into any new environment. Here's just a real simple EQ lesson. Your first time in a new environment, whether it's a church, a school, a group, a new group for something, don't within your very first interaction let the people who run it know how they could do better.
Yeah.
Yep. The amount of times that I have met new people that are like, hey, if I could just make a suggestion. I'm like, you have been here for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of assumptions about us because we're very thoughtful in what we do. Yeah. Not that there aren't things we can get better at and learn, and we're always open to that. But when you haven't even been through one full weekend or one full experience, like you haven't even attended.
Yeah.
If you haven't, and now if someone had a bad interaction, they just were trying to be nice and just say, hey, this was kind of a rough, that's fine. That's understandable. But the only people that ever do this, are, can I just say, are really churched people. The only people that do this are the ones who are here's what I'd say. They're more than likely, they're the ones who are very comfortable in church environments, so much so that they think they can go into a brand new environment and then start telling everybody what they should and shouldn't do based on probably where they were. Yeah. And
which is a really I was going to use a different B word, a bold arrogance to be able to think, I'm going to And the other B word was not a cuss word. But
I was going to say, what kind of word was
it's not that word, but it's a word that just
brazen.
It falls along the lines of brazen, but
braggadocious. Okay.
But anyways, it's man. Let me say this.
Have you had that though?
I'll say this is the word I was going to say is synonymous with nerve. It takes some nerve to be able to walk into a place and think, man, I should critique. I should walk up to leadership and critique my first time.
You and I would say nerve. I would say on an EQ level, that is a lack of awareness.
Yes.
At the lowest level, that is the low EQ move, right?
Yes.
To go in and just first time. And I can give you some examples. I had a guy this summer. And he was there a little bit early before I think our second experience, so I couldn't tell it was in between the two. And someone said, oh, hey, Pastor Tim, this guy was wanting to meet you. It's like, okay. So the guy comes up and I say, hi, my name's Tim, and shake hands with him. Hi. He's just kind of squirrely, almost won't look at you. He's like, are you the pastor? Yeah, I am. Oh, okay. This is my first time here, and I don't know, my wife said she wants to find another church. We've been going to this other church, right? I don't really want to, but she really wants to, wanted to try another church. And so I guess we're here and all. And so I was just wondering, do you preach from the Bible? And I'm like, I literally just met this guy, and he hasn't even been through an experience. And I'm like, yeah, I usually do every single week. I was like, have you attended yet? Because I thought, okay, do you have that question after a message? You know, you could. And it was like, no, we just got here, and I was just wondering. And he just kind of was like peppering me with all these questions. You know, do you do this? Do you have this? What version do you use? What like this? So I just, I just want, I only want to be a place where the pastor is going to preach from the Bible. I only want, all this stuff. I was like, okay, well, I said, feel free to attend, and hopefully, it's just again. So immediately I'm going, okay, I don't know that this sounds really awful. I am allowing people into my head. Immediately after that interaction, I go, I hope he kind of doesn't like it, and I hope he doesn't come back. Should I not say that?
If you're listening to this, he loves you. No, it's fair.
Can I? All right, Lydia, we're gonna cut that out.
No, you're fine. I think, but there is.
Well, there's a second half to the story.
Oh. Okay.
Do you want the second half, or you want to say something?
Well, I'll just say, I want to show compassion. There may be people that it's very.
This episode's not.
It is very important for you to find, if you follow Jesus, to find a church that you believe you can trust and you can root your life in.
I agree with all
those
that.
things are great. I would say there is a difference between your own personal testing of whether a church is healthy and feeling the liberty to go the first week and put them on trial. You
haven't even sat through anything, and you're already peppering with questions.
Yeah, that is very low EQ.
It was just red flag for massive low EQ and low EQ and
high neediness.
Yeah, and just like, okay, you have a church expectation that I can't imagine I'm going to meet. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. So it's not, and part of it is, listen, we do welcome anybody, so I don't want to sound like I'm not. I'm just, that kind of interaction is what I'm trying to say is, because it could be somebody I may actually really enjoy at some day, some point. It won't happen because he didn't come back. But that's because of the second interchange we had. But it's you are shutting the door, and you don't even realize that you're not only reflecting badly, can I just say, on yourself, but you are probably undercutting your ability to have authentic relationships with people. Yeah. When you lead with questions.
Yeah,
and
your job is
narrative.
not to walk in churches and put them on trial.
No, come in and experience the whole thing. And that's, if I'm going to go to a church first time, I mean, I'll have, especially being someone who's very church and professional, church, right, business, I'm going to have a myriad of thoughts just from my experience of running church and stepping into a church. But I am not going to go up. I don't care if it's the first week, second week, third week. I would not even go up to the pastor or one of them and make some suggestions for the message. I've had that before.
Yeah. I've had really close friends in ministry that I will fly and either speak to their church, encourage their staff, and they've asked me, like they'll invite me to speak into things that I see, and I'll find nice ways to do it. But even with that though, if there's a moment I fly in and I know them well and I've built relational equity and I've spoken into their church a lot, when I fly back in, unless they ask me
I'm still not.
I won't speak anything.
No, this is they're going to do things the way they feel like they're supposed to do things. Yep. If they ask for it, then I will. Yeah. And so anyways, I'll finish this story.
I can't wait.
It was pretty funny. So we're doing the Revelation series. End times. And I'm only on it's either week 1 or week 2. I'm really early in. And I've had this happen a couple times, where a lot of people are coming and they're just telling you about all these Bible verses that maybe you should consider and think about for using your message. And in the back of your mind going, yep, there's 6 weeks in this series and I'll be preaching on that week 4. And thank you for bringing it up to me, but this guy.
They're just trying to help you, Pastor.
No, I appreciate that. I sound really like a jerk today. We might have to.
No, I love.
We might have to cut this episode. I know I sound horrible.
No,
I know I do. I don't.
I'm really.
Honest. I'm not. Yeah, I'm just being a little honest. Again, I don't feel this way toward 99% of the people I meet. It is the 1% of people that kind of you just tell they have really low human EQ. Yeah. Even if they think they have high church IQ. Yeah. And so this guy, we get done with the message. And he comes right up to me, beeline, doesn't say a word about the experience, doesn't say a word about the message he just heard. Doesn't like, hey, man, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for that. Like kind of the human thing. You know, if somebody gave a message and then you had something that you wanted to ask about it, like I'm just not going to, you know, first thing you do, walk up and, hey, so, I mean, it's pretty clear in the Bible that the rapture is happening. That was the very first thing that he said coming up. And at this point, after my first interaction, and then the way he approached me after that, and I hadn't even got to it. Like, we talked about it weeks later, you know, because Gina Woods was watching this whole. I decided I was just going to go in on him.
Yep.
First week. And so I just started going in on I said, without getting into all the theological, you know, type of stuff, I just basically said, oh, the particular theological position that you're talking about that really started about 100 years ago but wasn't shared with the broader community of the church for the previous 2,000 years, is that one you're talking about? Well, and I started asking him all these questions about, I said, are you talking about this? And I just started naming some of these things. And he was, well, I don't know about that, but I mean, it's just really clear that the Bible said, like, what passage are you talking about? Well, you know, where it just talks about, no, I mean, like what particular, I mean, I just kind of went in and I just kind of like grilled in a very nice way.
Well, what I'm picturing is they had to pick up pieces of them off the floor afterwards.
No, I was very polite, but I'm like, if you're going to come at me with something you're so sure of, and it's just like this is just what I'm saying. This is EQ. EQ, that doesn't mean that you can't ask that question. That's a very valid question that you could ask. EQ is the way you ask that question. It was the way you approach the conversation.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the very first thing you say after that first exchange we had before it is you make a beeline and you don't even say, hey, enjoyed the experience. Hey, that was a great message. Or, hey, I enjoyed that message. I was thinking, I have a question that I've always had that I've just wondered about, like, you know, about whether the rapture and this. And I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but I just, do you think that, you know, there's one, if you come and ask a question like that, dude, I'm going to have a real nice conversation. But I intentionally, knowing it was his first time, I told Gina when he walked, because after I just stared at him, when I asked him a few things about where this is in Scripture that he's referring to and what particular theology he's referring to, after a moment or two of going back, and he kept asking me the same question. Yeah, but I mean, it's like really clear in the Bible. I'm like, exactly where are you talking about? You know, and then, so I had to bring up references because he didn't have any, and all these, well, he didn't have any. I mean, he didn't say. Just again, this is, and so
Poor
then
guy's in therapy.
I just looked at him at one point when I asked a question, and he just went, and he's turned around and walked away, and I told Gina, she just looked at it, she goes, oh my gosh, and she was laughing, and I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure he won't ever be back.
Well, let me say this.
I was polite. I wasn't mean. I just, you know.
This guy's in therapy. We're going to send
He's
you
not in
We're going to pay for
therapy.
your therapy. Okay, so, but let me say this. For real. For anybody that knows you knows your heart. You're one of the kindest, most compassionate people I know. Extremely generous.
Maybe I shouldn't have told the story.
No, but let me say this. In case there's anybody listening to this thinking, you're a jerk.
I know.
Let me say,
That's okay.
I do think there's something worth considering from time to time. And it's this. When you look at Jesus, who is the epitome of love and compassion and grace,
Okay.
you'll notice something. He had endless mercy for people far from God.
Yes.
And he was brutal on church people.
Yeah.
Brutal.
To religious, hyper-religious people.
He was gentle with people that were extremely lost spiritually.
Yeah.
And he was really hard
Yeah.
on religious people. And you didn't call him a brood of vipers and a snake.
I did not. I
So-
didn't say anything personal or mean.
Yeah.
I just, if he was going to come at me with,
And here's,
That-
here's what I'm getting at. Is there is something at times, and unlike Jesus, you're human, so there are moments you will get in the flesh. And I'm not Jesus, and there are moments I will get in the flesh.
wait, was that in the flesh?
I don't know. Only you and Jesus know. But I will say this. I do think when you're in your ministry long enough, it is easy to pick up on a religious spirit.
Yeah.
And when it comes to questions, what I hear you saying is there is a difference between genuine questions and a questioning spirit.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of grace when you've been in ministry for a while and you begin to immediately pick up on a questioning spirit. Because somebody that's just, hey, help me understand.
Oh, I love those conversations.
Let's sit down for hours. When somebody like, hey, yeah, my last church did this. Why are y'all doing this?
Yeah.
There's something that rises up real quick. Like, there's a lot of people in this room that are broken and hurting that I want to talk to, and I don't know how much time I have to, for me and you to go in circles.
Yeah.
When my experience tells me I'm not going to be able to appease you anyways.
Yes. I can't change your mind.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
Like,
okay, so that's one example.
You're very correct in saying I don't want people to listen to this and go, boy, don't ask Pastor Tim questions. I really don't mind. I love questions. I love theology questions. I love questions of Bible, questions of life. I absolutely love it. Like, I crave that. And I don't have all the answers, but I do enjoy the process of thinking through those. It's like what you're saying. It was a critical questioning spirit that a religious elite had. And I knew he was churched from the very first conversation that we had. So I am definitely not like that with people who have honest questions. And that it's just, again, it could have been a very different interaction in the fact that how he approached it coming up. Again, all you had to do was have a little bit of human elegance, a human grace, a little human, like, this is a person. And, it's like, we learn to have thick skin in preaching. And, you have to realize, man, you're going to preach things that people aren't going to like. You're going to preach things that people get mad at. I've had people say all kinds of different things about me and things that they think I believe and all these assumptions, and I don't care, right? But there's a level of humanness when somebody gets up and they talk for 40 minutes about something, that there's just a level of going up and go, hey, man, thank you for that. Or, hey, that was really good.
Yeah.
Even if you, like, I don't know, but hey, man, I really enjoyed the service today. You gave me a lot of things to think about.
Yep.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. I can tell you put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
I can tell you do a lot of preparation. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. Like, there's got to be a way that you could begin your conversation
with kindness.
That is with just kindness, realizing that's a person and a human. Again, he wasn't offensive to me that in that regard. I just felt like there was, like you said, a religious questioning or critical spirit that he probably thought he could have from his church experience and was going to show up on day one, and I was just going to roll over and take it. And I just really, here's what I know, and I have found with interactions with people like that, if you just grin and bear it, and you just if you don't meet it with the same, I don't want to say with a low level EQ, but meet it with a level of directness.
That's true.
You think that you're being nice by not saying something that could be offensive.
Yeah.
But what I have found is those same people will get offended 4 weeks from now. You're going to have the conversation at some point that they're going to, you know what I mean? So why not just come right out in a nice way? I was nice. I never called the guy names. I didn't say you're an idiot. I didn't say you don't know anything. I didn't say any of that,
Yeah.
I'm just going to I'm just going to start going, well, you're talking about dispensational theology? Okay, let's talk about it.
No, it's very true.
I
Like,
don't know what you're talking about.
I think when, Proverbs says a gentle answer turns away wrath. When someone's really angry and hurt, in your most ideal moment, you want to choose a gentle answer to diffuse wrath. But when it comes to, and this sounds really spiritual, when it comes to a spirit, like a religious spirit, I agree. I found you have to hit it head on.
Yeah.
You actually have to address it. And I don't mean like religious spirit, come out.
Hey,
but I mean, and this sounds weird unless you're just in it and you begin to, almost like your five senses. You can grow your five senses.
Yeah.
You're here and you can grow your spiritual senses, and you begin to pick up on things. And it's almost like you have to find a way without saying it to hit it head on. And I'm picking on you, but something similar happened to me at the prayer meeting.
I was just gonna say, is that not an interaction that we should even mention?
I don't know if I should mention it,
Since they have a friend who goes here.
but I got And people that know me would not even be able to probably imagine me being aggressive. And I never, like, I don't know. I
The
honestly
best part
don't know.
was this. I'll say this piece.
Okay.
Okay. So you don't have to give a lot of context because they're maybe connected to someone here, but it was just a guy who showed up who was very critical almost of everything from a moment he got here.
And belligerent.
And showing up at an odd kind of time. It's not like a normal weekend thing. And then was just odd through the whole experience from what I understand. I wasn't there, but when I understand, the best part about this whole thing was as he was at the end questioning, critiquing all this different stuff, and then he asks you, well, maybe we can get lunch or we can get together and we can talk about it. And your response was, yeah, no, I'm not going to meet with you.
Now people listening are really going to think I'm the shirt.
No, but I actually applaud it. I applaud it because this was not, again, here's we're letting you a little bit behind the curtain of some of the interactions and things that we have. I hope you don't think like this is not how we are in general toward anybody who's just comes into our community who's broken, hurting, has questions authentically and is curious and asking because they really want to know.
Yeah.
This is somebody that from the moment he showed up, why is this like this? I mean, never been inside our building once. Why is this like this? Why isn't that like that? Why you did this? Why you did that? Like it's just again, you can also tell. You can tell when you run into a religious critical spirit.
Yeah,
and that was
I
this
think
guy
part
had a
of it-
religious critical spirit.
Yeah, I think part of it. I know. God,
You want to defend yourself?
I hope anybody listening just, the hope is people that know us, but because I will literally meet with anybody. This is one of the favorite things I love about my life, my job is I meet. Oh my gosh, I meet with people who've been following Jesus for 30 years. I have lunch with atheists and Hindus. And I don't mind meeting with people that have a problem with me. I mean, I had met with somebody recently that from your art of communication was like, hey, like I need to talk to you because you may not even realize I've been holding an offense against you. And we had the most gracious conversation. And like, I am like not easily offended. Somebody can tell me all day long. And I hope if somebody ever has an issue with me, come tell me. Yeah. It is not that. But I will say, my mind goes back sometimes when the 5 years I was in ministry in Atlanta and I was dating a girl at the time, and she knew enough to know like things that were going on at the church. And I, for some reason, I went through a long period where if there would be anybody divisive in the church or just super religious or just get on a theological high horse and start causing, I would just lose myself. I'd be like, well, I'm going to meet with them. And I think I'd convince myself if I can meet with them for hours and show them in scripture. And finally, I was dating a girl that finally one day was like, Russ, why do you literally give your emotional time and energy to this? And I think I realized at some point, like it is an unwise stewardship of my time, especially in a church our size when there are people, every moment that I choose to meet with somebody, it means I'm choosing to not meet with somebody else. And I think I just realized, I'm like, man, if somebody's not open and their only agenda is to have a point to prove, and there's a religious spirit,
I don't have time for that.
I could appease my flesh by talking to them and debating with them, or I could just be direct, and save their time and my time and actually go love and serve other people. And so, it's hard to get the rest of the context that would probably make that moment make more sense other than my 5 minutes of talking with him. And my 20 years of walking with Jesus told me,
red flag.
Absolutely not. And so he doesn't go to our church. Part of it was I told him, I said, hey, like, I'm not going to meet with you and to debate all this. If you ever come back here and you genuinely are interested in our community and you want to go to Welcome to the X and your heart's genuine and postured and you still have questions, absolutely.
Yeah.
But based on this interaction,
no.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I love that though. But here's what I want to say, and I know we probably got to wrap up soon because we could probably go on, and we've got stories. But what I'm trying to say is we have decided to kind of make a little bit of shift in how we lead to an extent sometimes within our community, where we're going to do what is the best possible thing for that person, even if it's kind of direct and it doesn't. What I'm saying is, in the church world, for the longest time, nobody calls anybody out for being weird. Am I right?
It's very true.
I'm saying we're like, oh, they're just spiritual. They're just this. I think the problem is someone like that will never kind of learn basic EQ stuff. If somebody doesn't just kind of go, no, I'm not going to. Because my guess is that, that same guy could go from church to church and place, and everybody wants to try to appease. And because there's this whole idea of like, I've got to love it. Okay, I'm not saying I'm not going to love you, but I'm not going to give my time to you when you're like this. And I think you can absolutely see this modeled in the New Testament.
True.
You can see this modeled where people were like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And so I say all that to say that we just kind of are like decided, and we're not always great at this, but it's like, hey, if somebody is saying or doing something that really is a turnoff, or is actually like, you don't have the self-awareness to realize that the reason why you don't have any friends is because you always hide behind really spiritual language. It's because every time you go talk with somebody, you always say, I have a word from the Lord for you.
Yep.
Even if you do have something from somebody,
Yep.
from God, you do have a word. There are way better ways. And that's the thing. The EQ part of that is like, you may sense like God's put something on your heart for someone, which, by the way, whenever God does that in the context of the New Testament, it's always for edification.
Yep.
There's a lot of parking lot prophets that love to go around and just try to take God's, this and that, and they want to tear down and this, and that is not of God, and at least not scripturally. And so when you have again, here's just an idea. I just feel like I got something that God's laid on my heart to encourage this person, to give the person, right? Don't walk up to them and don't ever just do, hey, man, I've just got a word from God for you. First of all, you do not know how much of that. You may have a sense, a feeling, may have a thought. You may have something, an impression that God wants you to go. He's going to work through you. But I never want to assume that the moment I say that phrase, everything out of my mouth right after that is directly from God.
Yeah.
I got to think that there's a lot of my own flesh potentially mixed in with that.
Yeah, I think the way you guard that is through a dual reality of high EQ and high fear of God.
Yeah.
Because I just am so terrified to speak for God. And
Me
so
too.
even when I'm pretty sure, I will still say, hey, this is what I sense.
Yeah, and I might be wrong.
And I might be wrong.
And if I am, please forgive me and just ignore it.
Put an airbag around
Yes,
it.
that's what we're saying. So EQ leads you to think human, even if you have something spiritual you want to say.
Yes. So quick examples as we wrap up. Yes. Number one, when it comes to speaking for God, don't make it a habit to go into other people's churches and start giving out words.
Yeah.
Even in your own church.
Yeah.
Build relationships, and off the equity of those relationships, if you sense God share something with you, I think a few practical phrases is, hey, I don't even know if this is going to resonate. This may sound odd, but I just really sense blank.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, hey, can I just tell you what I see? And the truth is, if something's from God, then you don't have to use the God card for it to resonate.
Yeah.
Because if it's really God speaking, then you don't have to pull the card trick of using his name.
It'll be just what that person needed.
Yes, it'll be just what that person needed, and it'll resonate so deeply. And, I do think, especially if anybody thinks we're jerks, I do think this really is also holding each other accountable in a healthy, humble way to EQ really actually does change the other person's life if they're open. I think I mentioned this about a month ago, but there's somebody I met with that, in my view, again, who do I know? I'm sure I have a whole lot of areas to grow in EQ, but he's very hyper spiritual in all his language. And we had lunch one day, and he was just opening up to me about some of his relationships, and I just said a phrase I think is a good phrase. I said, hey, do you mind if I share a thought with you? And he said, sure. And I just shared with him. I said, hey, you use a lot of really hyper spiritual language that I think is hurting your relationships. And I think it's because I don't think it's intentional or ill-intentioned or malice or malicious or whatever. And I just shared with him, I said, and so I said, can I just give you a few suggestions? I said, you need to get out into some real relationships. I said, you're not getting out with a lot of friends, are you? No. And all the people you've ever known are really church, aren't they? Yeah. I said, I want to just encourage you to get out and to just go out. Yeah. Go to some games with some people, ask some friends from work to go to dinner, and just be human. And he came back to me a month later and said it changed his life. It's helping his marriage, helping his relationships,
That's
helping
awesome.
everything. And I'll say as a pat in the back, I'm saying I think we all need that
Yeah.
those mirror moments from time to time.
Yeah.
Really, this reminds me of the story. If you think we're brutal, reminds me of the story of, there's a leader we're connected with on the other side of the country that told us the story of a woman that came to the church that was always giving words to everybody in the church.
Yeah.
And was talking to his wife one day and said, and his wife pulled him over and said, hey, she wants some counsel. And she says, yes, help me, because nobody in the church is listening to my prophetic words. They won't listen. And he just looked at her, and his first words were, do you want to die alone? She's like, what? It's like, I'm not going to, if you don't, he goes, I care too much about you to pretend that what you're doing is healthy.
Yeah.
And if you don't quit pretending like all your opinions are from God and just go humble yourself and love and serve and connect with people, you're going to die alone.
Mm-hmm.
And she came back and they say it's like his wife was so angry. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
But the lady came back 3 months later and said it changed her life.
Yeah.
And I think this is the power of EQ.
Mm-hmm.
I want to grow my EQ. I want the people in my life to grow our EQ. I want the people in this church, for all of us to grow our EQ together, because it's going to help us love each other better, see each other better, help each other better, and also connect with the people outside of these walls in a true human way.
No, that's all good. I mean, we could probably go on forever. I mean, I got so many phrases I could use, but we're out of time.
Maybe we'll do a part two. At some
Maybe.
point.
I think to, just to wrap up, we probably should have put this on the very front end. So it's the very back end of it. But, the whole premise behind emotional intelligence is being aware of your emotions, being aware of how you are coming across to other people. It's being aware of their emotions and the interactions or how they're coming across to you or to others. It's just, it's a social intelligence. And I think sometimes, I guess let me say this, the longer and the more immersed you are into any single church environment, I think, this sounds bad, but I think it's easier to lose a little bit of EQ points.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that our social intelligence isn't sharpened. And that's what you told that guy, basically, like, hey, you need to develop your social intelligence. Go get around some people that are a little bit different than you. And then all of a sudden you're going to realize, dude, I can't talk like that. I need to act kind of normal. I need to not throw around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do think that the danger in all this, and some of it just sounds like this is just kind of like human interactions, and it is, but I think in a church world, anytime you add spirituality to it, you add what I would say is a dangerous component to relationships and EQ in relationships, because you tend to draw on or lean on spiritual authority in relationships that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's an awareness, and there's a little bit, like you said, a fear of God and respect that, I think a great maybe practice is, if you do feel like you have something to encourage somebody else with, that or maybe even don't know a lot. I think even if you don't know a lot, but for some reason maybe you had an interaction or two and God put something on your heart to encourage them, to encourage them, that's where I would use, like you said, some of the preface language that you mentioned, like, hey, I know we don't know each other very well, but I was praying the other day and I felt like God just wanted me to encourage you with this, and if this isn't that, or I just felt like I was supposed to encourage you. Maybe even say that instead of God wanted me to.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes that's probably the dangerous part. It's like, wait, how do you know for sure God wanted you to? And again, when it's usually some of that stuff's even not that bad as long as it's actual encouragement. A lot of times it's not, but I think if you have an encouraging word for somebody, you can preface that and go, hey, if this is helpful and means anything, great. And if not, just drop it. Forget it's probably me just a missing thing. But I think there's also another layer when it comes to the aspect we talked about earlier, which is when you have a critique or criticism or questioning spirit or questions. Again, questions are okay when it's done in the right spirit. That, I think, you really need relational equity. So if you were to split the two of those for me. I think there's one where maybe you not had a lot of interactions, but you really sense like something that you think would encourage them, and maybe it's from God. And so you're going to preface that, and you go, "If this is helpful," and like you said, you don't even really need to say, "God gave me a word for you."
Yeah. The ironic thing about this is we're actually a high feedback culture.
Yeah.
It really just depends on who's from. Yeah. We have servant leaders that have been a part of our community for years, and they come in and they serve in our auditorium team, our kids. And when there's people that are planted in our community and they're serving and they come up to us, or we ask them, "Hey, how can we and they come up and they are in the trenches with us, and they have a thought because they're rolling with us. Oh my gosh, that holds weight.
Yeah, that's the thing. And so if you don't have relational equity of any type, in other words, you haven't even been here but once or twice, you haven't gone to Welcome the X, you haven't heard why we do what we do, because sometimes it's hard to always tell that just on a weekend. That's what you go to Welcome the X for. It's like if somebody comes for a while, goes through all of those steps, and they have questions, and that happens a lot of times. Man, we'll take as much time as we can to talk through it all with you. But you can tell when somebody's coming with a critical spirit. Day one, and if you don't have that kind of equity, I'm just telling you, you're not going to probably be met with what you anticipate being met with, because in church environments before, people haven't been direct with you. Yeah. And I've never really said...
And direct is not unkind.
No, it's not. It could be the most kind thing that you can do sometimes. I have never done... There have been conversations I've had with people, and I've bit my lip a little bit and not said, but part of me wanted to walk away from... or wanted to say, but I did not. And again, this is where I'm trying to balance, like, what it is, of just kind of like, "Hey, can I know you're here for the first time and they've just thrown out 3 suggestions of why don't you do this, this, and this." And part of me just want to go, "Hey, can I just make one suggestion?" And that is, the first time you ever go to a new environment, the last thing you should do is maybe just give a bunch of suggestions of what they should do. Yep. I have not said that yet.
And can you do some R&D and try that and then report back to us here on the podcast?
It's hard. I am not that type of person. Like, it would be hard for me to say something like that.
You're not a confrontational type
I'm not.
And people listen probably think you're confrontational. You're actually not confrontational.
No. When it comes to theology, if you want to argue that, I'll argue with you.
You have fun debating. Me and you debate theology.
Oh, yeah. I don't mind debating. Again, I'm not going to be mean or jerk. I'm just talking. This was kind of not even that. This is just basic EQ stuff where I want to throw up a mirror and just go, "Hey, you've just made 4 suggestions. This is the first time I ever met you. I'll give you another one, and this will be the last one." Okay. And I do think that there's a little bit of a cultural difference, because I've had several foreign people who've come to the church who kind of have their own kind of ministries. And this has mostly been, again, the reason why I say that is because I think sometimes in maybe other cultures it's not perceived this way, but I'm just saying in our culture it is. That the very first moment you meet them, they not only pull out their business card, but then they don't even mention a word about what they experience here. But they have a list of all of the accomplishments that they have, and what they're looking for is an opportunity to peddle their book, their ministry, their whatever, And so we've had some people even that have come to and I say it's happened sometimes with foreign, because I think that maybe in a different culture, that's very different. It's very normal to do that. But I'm saying here, I had that interaction yesterday. So I'm saying here, when someone comes up to you and it's the very first time you meet them, and within 5 seconds, they begin to tell you everything they do, every ministry they have, everything they do, and then they go to shake your hand, and then they slip a card in your hand.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, that kind of thing. And maybe that's more, but I've had that happen with even local people at times. And it's like, don't think that any other ministry is even going to care about supporting that ministry when they can tell the only reason you're there is to get something.
Yeah.
Not to actually be encouraged, not to be a part of a community. Like, we have to have those conversations with people at times. And so that's what I'm saying. That's, again, I don't know how much that translates as much to the, maybe it's different cultures, but I just thought.
Just go into new environments and just make friends.
Just receive what you can receive. And if it's not a place where you can receive, then just recognize that maybe it's not for you. But if there's other people there, then maybe it is for them.
Yeah.
So.
Let us know your thoughts as you write it.
Nah, I think this is one of those episodes that I would say, don't bother letting us know your thoughts. I bet you're going to get some hate.
Pastor Tim loves you.
I
and
do.
I love you too.
Russ put me up to most of this. I just want to say. I've not actually said these things. He told me to make up stories.
The ironic thing is we get to talking and it sounds like, but the truth is, we have the best community ever.
Oh yeah, this is 1%, less than this is a percent of 1%,
right?
Of interactions that we have in our community.
And also, like, the reason we get to experience the beautiful mess of all this is because a lot of churches our size, for whatever reason, like, the leaders go hide in a green room afterwards.
No.
But me and you are so relational, like, the idea of doing that makes me want to throw up.
I can't do it.
I'm like, my favorite part of our community is our community.
Yeah,
is
I totally agree.
Meet people and connect with people and do life with people.
I know.
And so you get the fun and the beautiful and the ugly and the everything in between.
I think most people would say we're approachable.
Yeah, I hope so.
There's probably a few from these interactions that we had that would maybe disagree.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Have an approachable approach and you'll have an approachable response.
There you go.
With that said, we love you. We hope you still love us, and we will see you next week.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.